Hey, we're going to talk about comic books today with George Kessler. It's going to be a lot of fun. He knows a lot about comic books. And I think the girls are going to like it too.
And then we'll be living so happily. So I'm waiting for you. I got nothing to do while I'm waiting.
We're going to be talking to George and his comic book collection. I believe it's, he can tell you more about it. Let's say hello to George here. Hey, George, how are you?
Oh, I'm doing okay. And let me introduce you to my friend Edvard, who might kick in a few ideas on this.
Hello, Edvard. Now, you've got, your comic book collection is called The Silver. It's like older, pre-1960?
Well, most of the books in my collection, or I have a collection that is all Golden Age comic books. So that's roughly from 1938 with the beginning of Superman.
Okay.
Until, well, people disagree, but until about the late 40s. So it's pretty much World War II time. Yeah. I go for the oddball comic books. You know, the characters with really strange names and weird costumes and creepy villains and bad dialogue, all of those things.
It's sort of cheeky, I guess, right? That's the fun of it? That's the fun of it. Now, these
well, what they were writing for really an audience of 12-year-olds back then. And a lot of it, what really fascinates me is how it ties into the time and the spirit of the time.
Then this is going to be World War II era, these comics you're going to show us, right? What can you tell us? What can you tell us about this one then?
Well, let's start just with the title there. It is All American Comics. And so that's important. And, Barney, today you have your superheroes out facing all of these horrible intergalactic menaces, whole space armadas coming towards us, and they really have their hands full. But in the old days, a lot of their time, they didn't spend fighting supervillains. They spent it working in their community and helping people out there. Just take a look. Over here, we have the Green Lantern, who is flying toward Dippy the pickpocket. And the idea is he's going to help him out, help him break his pickpocket, his ways, so that he can stop stealing. So, you can see poor Dippy there. He's got such a compulsion that he's stolen the Green Lantern's lantern, and he's also stolen the fat guy's belt. This is one of the first comic books I ever bought, by the way.
Oh, really?
First Golden Age comic books I ever bought. I'd found a place called Read More Books, and that was spelled Reedmor, which was a dusky old used bookstore in Philadelphia, PA. And I discovered that they had old comics in the basement. They wouldn't let me go down, but the custodian I'd give him a list, he'd bring them up, and this is one of the first ones that I got. And so it has real sentimental value for me.
Super Mystery Comics.
There we go, Super Mystery. And I think, first of all, you can just see this is jam-packed with action. There was the Lantern, helping out a pickpocket. Here are Magno, and he's trussed up with Davy there. Then the Sword's coming in from the right, trying to help out. And between them is this really horrible-looking Japanese soldier. Let's point out, we can see from this cover that since we were at war with the Japanese and the Germans, they were not depicted as attractive human beings. They were depicted as, the Japanese had thick glasses and big buck teeth. The Germans just looked bestial, big broken teeth also. So we were not kind. You've got the big robot there being run by the Japanese. And so this was a pretty typical Golden Age cover in that it's all about the war. This is a job for people who are either just kids, or because it didn't pay anything, or just kids or advertising art guys on their way down, on the skids. And so you might do here's the Shield. You might do a Shield story, 1 month, and then you'll be assigned a Black Hood story the next month, and you may have never seen these characters before, but you get a description of them, and you may get some sketches of them. The first superhero comic, Superman, Action Number 1, 1938. It had comic books before that, but they were either newspaper reprints or detectives and things like that.
Interesting. All right, what do you want to tell us about Dusty, the boy detective with the shield?
Well, Dusty's coming in from the back there. You can see him in the right. He's coming down the corridor, but the Shield himself is fighting off these hobgoblins or something.
Oh my God!
Are there? These are with their greenish tint skin, and watch out for that double hypo. You can pull out a bit, and you can see that he is threatening the beautiful damsel.
Looks like he already got her.
He's already gotten her, it looks like, in the neck.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Very interesting. He's got the spotlight
But so
on
once
her.
again, you've got a real patriotic superhero fighting some tough guys. Okay, starring Uncle Sam, America's outstanding character. And indeed he was. But what I wanted to point out particularly about this is we're fighting the Ratskis here, and everybody, kids, everybody is getting into it. On the left, you have Uncle Sam himself there, and above him, you have his sidekick buddy wielding a pretty mean Louisville Slugger there.
Yeah.
Using that, the Japanazis, as we called them.
And a bottle of port, it looks like.
Could be, or that could be that is a bottle of something. We don't know what it is.
It's probably root beer, keep this family. Probably root beer. Good old American. Right.
Yeah. But anyway, so if you look at this, one of the things that you will find about Golden Age comics is most of them were really busy, action-packed, and it's war action.
And throwing rocks.
So, of course, rocks, brickbats. Some of them were pitching hardballs at them.
It's hard to tell who the good guys and bad guys are.
Well, I think the bad guys are the ones wearing the skull on their jackets.
And they're also the ones that are getting punched. So that just, anybody who's getting punched is the bad guy, for sure.
Yeah.
Very interesting. Uncle Al.
So I mentioned Sunshine because he's one of the few African-American characters. And while in this book in particular, they have some stories in there that are really pro-civil rights and so forth, nevertheless, as they did in the time, Sunshine is also not treated very well in that has a very stereotypic look and speech.
Yeah.
But he's still one of the gang and a very useful part of the gang.
Quicksilver.
Oh, yes, Quicksilver, who had a sidekick, also had an African-American sidekick, who was unfortunately stereotypically slow.
Yeah, here's the next one here that you've shared with us.
So after you're done, beating the snot out of some Nazis, it's time to take a little rest, along with Captain Marvel Jr., who flew up on top of Miss Liberty's head just to feel the breeze and have a little rest.
It looks like he's having a good chill time there. And I might point this out. Does something look familiar about him? If that is not Tom Cruise.
No, he was not based on Tom Cruise. However, Captain Marvel himself, the adult Captain Marvel, as opposed to Captain Marvel Jr.,
right,
was based on his look was based on Fred McMurray.
Captain Marvel was.
Captain Marvel. You're stunned about that, aren't you? I could tell by the silence.
Are you saying this individual was made after Fred McMurray? Is that what you're saying?
No, I'm saying not this individual. This is Captain Marvel Jr.
Ah, ha ha ha. Yes, he's got
The big superhero, one of the big rivals of Superman, was Captain Marvel himself, or as the villains called him, the Big Red Cheese.
Really, the Big Red Cheese.
Yes.
I mean,
and the Big Red Cheese, when he was born, was based. His look was based on Fred McMurray.
All right. Did Fred know that? Was that a issue back?
I don't know if Fred ever knew that.
Huh.
So here we go again, jumping right into the fray. In the foreground, you have a Razzie general who's conferring with a Japanese officer about some war plans. And as you can see, those are a couple of pretty
that's
ugly MFs there.
Yeah, not too flattering. Not too flattering.
Fortunately, the Sandman and his sidekick Sandy, a fine all-American pair, are swinging in from behind them to take care of this.
So it's 2 against 3. So that's a fair fight, right? They didn't gang up. There were 3 of them.
Oh, yeah.
So 2 against 3.
Even though they're sneaking up.
Well, the one guy seems like he got caught off guard, unless he was just sleeping. Yeah. I'm not sure. Looks like they're dragging him, flying him in there. He was probably the guard at the door, and they nailed him first.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then they're going to come in.
All-American didn't have the war on its cover. It had this little homey story about the neighborhood pickpocket. But once you open up and you've read the stories, if you look down at the bottom of the pages there, you will see that they are still in the thick of the war. So they've got these little slogans printed down there. You can walk to school and store. Can we move it there? Saving gas helps win the war. You can walk to school and store. Saving gas helps win the war.
And on the other page,
and boys are smart. Girls are wise. The black market's not to patronize.
Well.
So then what they have in common again, even though there's no war on the cover, there is a war all through the comic there. Well, during the war, we had to get materials for the war drive, and, there were scarcities and things like that, hence the black market. But there were shortages,
yes.
And the superheroes were working on things. So, like when they'd collect old tires for a rubber drive, they'd buy war coupons, war stamps, things like that to raise money. Well, there were also paper drives, and guess what ended up being donated in mass quantities to the paper drives?
I would guess comic books.
You have guessed correctly, sir.
I bet you that makes a lot of people cringe. A lot of the collectors cringe nowadays.
Jughead, disguising himself as Hitler for the school carnival dunking booth. Betty had put a dummy of Hitler that she's painting up there, but all the better if you've got a real person.
Yes, Jughead didn't lose his stereotypical schmirk there, I guess.
No, he remained anhedonic to the last.
Okay, that's a really big word. Can you define that for me?
Oh, having no joy or pleasure in anything. But it isn't really what Jughead was about, but he always looked as if he were,
Sorry, that was my wife calling. She told me to hurry up, dinner's ready. But she can wait. It's just salad anyway.
You can see down there that all-American girl, Betty Cooper, who's contributing to the war effort.
She is doing a good job there?
Yes.
And where's Archie here?
I don't think Archie was on that page.
Oh,
And that's the page from the last story. So,
he needs to get a better manager. He's getting cut out of the shot.
oh, there he is. He's down in the lower left.
There, this guy right there. Yeah, let me
With
get,
his Riverdale, with his R for Riverdale.
let me get a good shot of. There he is.
There he is. So, this beautifully, Barney, this beautifully, illustrates my point. Everybody, even slugabeds like lazy guys like Jughead are getting into the war effort. And the Green Lantern's in there, and his sidekick Doiby Dickles is in there, and the Kid Patrol is in there, and it seemed like everybody agreed about something. I think so. I think that gives you at least a little taste of what it was like in the thick of the war with these comics. And I often like to wonder if my parents had ever read these comics. My dad was like a 19-year-old Marine. I'm not sure where he was stationed at that time, but I can see a 19-year-old Marine sitting around the PX, kind of bored, leafing through the comic books.
Were there comic books that were actually like G.I. Joe comic books that were just straight up soldiers out there fighting?
Not so much. I mean, there were some, not so much in the Golden Age. In Golden Age, most of the comics were anthology comics. So they would have a number of different characters in there. So you might have, for example, here you have Green Lantern. So there will be a Green Lantern story. Then there might be a story about, well, he wouldn't be in this, but, Quicksilver, the fastest man in the world. And then there's Sorceress of Zoom, a scientific or a science fiction story. Then you have a story of, Rip Crenshaw, world adventurer. Just adventurers were big. And you'd often have different military types who were out fighting crime in addition to fighting the Nazis. So Red, White, and Blue featured Reddy, Whitey, and Bluey. One a soldier, one a GI, one a Marine, and one a sailor. So they'd have their stories in these books, but there weren't any that were really all war. Not too much, at least.
I understand there was a doctor who had a big campaign because he said that comic books were ruining kids' minds.
Dr. Frederick Wortham, head of the Harlem Child Guidance Center in the 1940s. Very well respected at the time, but he had some sort of a bug up his ass about comic books.
Well, he was worried about the youth.
Absolutely. But he tended to lapse to lump comic books all under the same cover. So, yeah, you've got the comic books where we saw those goblins with the hypodermic needles, and there were some that were very violent and, a little lurid and, a little sexier than you might want your kid looking at. But Dr. Wortham grouped those right in with Superman and Captain Marvel, who were as harmless as could be and promoted positive moral values. So that was a problem.
Whatever.
And Dr. Wortham wrote a book called Seduction of the Innocent.
Of course.
All about these horrible books, and led a crusade which many churches and civic organizations joined against comic books that really reached ahead in the early 50s.
And what was the result of that? Did they burn them? Did they?
I was going to say more burnt comic books. Fahrenheit 451 with comic books.
Yeah. Well, they didn't get rid of all of them. That kind of stuff can only...
They instituted the comic book code to censor themselves so they wouldn't be censored from the outside. So a lot of things had to disappear.
That happened to the film industry. The film industry did chose to do its own censoring instead of being controlled. So, yeah.
Exactly.
And then, let's see, there was Captain Marvel and Superman.
Captain Marvel.
There was a bit of a thing that happened between those two. Superman came out first, and then they did Captain Marvel, and then there was a lawsuit?
Yeah, for copyright infringement, because Superman was the first superhero, and Captain Marvel came along a little after that. Same powers, almost exactly. Flying, super strength, invulnerability. He wears a cape. It's a little tiny cape on his part, but and so the people from Superman, realized he was trying to edge in on their market, and they said, "Look, this is just like our character. They got to get rid of him." Lawsuit went on for 12 years, and was only settled once Captain Marvel, the comic book, went out of business.
Well, that's that then. That's that.
Indeed.
But these comic books and these superheroes had a great revival with the movie industry in the last 20 years.
Well, that's true. The movie industry has discovered this as source material. Comics had a revival first again in the 60s, which was called Silver Age. Comics had gone out of business, but we were back into a new age. And since then, they've had their ups and downs, but they've been fairly healthy. Although now, people who are looking for superheroes tend to be going to the movies.
Well, we've got graphic novels now. That's sort of a continuation of, is that an extension of comic books? Did that grow out of comic books, what they call graphic novels now?
A graphic novel is a long comic book.
Okay. But
I can't say much more than that. And a comic might be just an episode of something, whereas a graphic novel will be self-contained.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of the first graphic novels were really collections of comics. For example, number 1 through 5 of Miracle Man, and we'll put them together and call it a graphic novel. But then there are also graphic novels that are original stories and that stand on their own.
But were they an extension from the comic book world? So did comic book people like graphic novels? It comes out of it? It's an extension of it?
Comic book people do graphic novels.
But for now, let's say goodbye to George and Edward. And
wave.
I think he is waving. Were we talking too loud? He's been covering his ears the whole time. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, great. Well, thank you very much, George. I'm going to get back to you in a second. I'm going to say goodbye to my friends. Then I'll get back to you in a second.
Okay. Thank you, Barney. Pleasure to be here.
All right. That was George Kessler and his comic book collection. Once a kid, always a kid. And that's a good thing. So, for now, I just want to say thank you very much for joining us. This is Barney Logan's podcast. And we'll see you next time.
In the evening, when the moon is low, I see the places that we used to go. But soon you will return to me, and that will